Okay, folks, so you've bought your rice and your beans, and like me, you've had them in the freezer, for at least a week. These have been in the freezer for a while, and as you see, I just took them out of the freezer. So I've got to let these sit. Okay, you got to remember these steps, folks, when you do this, okay? Because these are important steps. If you put this straight from the freezer into your canning jars or into your Mylar, and you have your sealer right here. So if you do that, you get moisture inside the jar. Even though you've sealed it with an oxygen absorber, it's going to go bad on you. It's going to create mold. So, you got to go through these steps, okay? Number one is you get your items, right? So, I've got 50 pounds of rice here. I've got 10 pounds of beans. I've got about 12 pounds of noodles. I got more I've got to pull out of the other freezer, okay? Now, what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to separate these out into individual, okay? Especially the pinto beans, because I don't eat a lot of pinto beans. So when I do eat them, I eat about a half pint per serving for just me and the dog, okay? So I normally have that with some rice and some carrots and peas and sweet potatoes. Anyway, what you do is you get your beans home from the store. You go and you take them, you put them in the freezer. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can just take them straight from the store and put them in jars with an oxygen absorber. Yeah, you could do that. You could do that. If that oxygen absorber is not good because it was made, let's admit it, it was made in China and sometimes they don't work, or it got air into the package on the way to your place, so it doesn't get a good seal. It seems to have a seal on it when you put it up on the shelf. When you pull it down out of the shelf, oh, hey, you know what? That oxygen absorber didn't work, and the bug eggs that are in the pasta or in the beans have hatched, and they've ate all your food. And they have reproduced inside that little container because, let's admit it, for them, they are in nirvana heaven, eating your food that you paid for. So I go through these steps, and I recommend this for any dry goods whatsoever you buy on the market today. Being a truck driver, I can tell you that having bugs in your dry food is probably a guarantee. I've been to some of these places. I've seen their facilities. Okay? So, unless you're drying it yourself, I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some kind of bug eggs in it. So you want to freeze it. So you freeze it at least 72 hours. At least. And the reason for that is, if you freeze it only for 24 hours, it might kill 80% of the bug eggs, but there's still that 20%. But if you go with the USDA recommended time, that is minimum 72 hours. So we're gonna freeze these for 72 hours. Then we're gonna take them out of the freezer and let them come to room temperature. And that normally takes anywhere from 8 to 24 hours, depending on the size of the package that you freeze. Now, these smaller packages, about 8 hours. These bigger packages of just 50-pound bags of rice, these are 225-pound bags. This is going to take 24 hours. So I'm not going to be able to can these up or put these in Mylar bags until tomorrow. That's fine. You see how it's sweating? You don't want that in your jars, okay? So let it sweat off. I have them on top of my stove, obviously, so, they can sweat off and be good to go. So once they've sat for up to 24 hours, you're going to take your Mylar bags, right? Your Mylar bags. You're going to put your product in the Mylar bags. You're going to put an oxygen absorber, right? One of your oxygen absorbers in your Mylar bag. Now, depending on how big of a Mylar bag or how big of a canning jar you put them in will determine how big of an oxygen absorber. Now, I like these. These are easy, okay? And they are 300 cc. And I buy them. This is Wise Dry. Okay, I buy them off of Amazon, big package of them. I use this every year. I buy a big package of them and use them up. Normally, I will put 2 of these in each quart jar, 1 in each pint jar or half pint jar. I know that's a little bit of an overkill. I'm sure there's going to be somebody who says, "Oh, you don't need to do that." Okay, whatever. I'm going to err on the side of safety, and we're going to put 2 per quart jar. Okay. Make sure you use good lids. You can use lids, but inspect that lid. Make sure that it does not have. Here's a good example. This is a used lid. I can use this lid to keep the crap out of my jar if I'm storing empty jars. However, this lid is no good. I'll say this very clearly. This lid is no good to reuse to seal any kind of food in. It is only good to keep the dust out of my already sanitized jars. Okay? The reason being, you see right there, that is a little bit of mold, and that is a nick in the edge of the canning jar. I don't know if you can see it really well, but there is a small nick right there. There's another one over on this side. Same thing, a little bit of black mold. See that? And a nick. This one's more defined. You can see it a little bit better right there. This lid is no good for storing your dry goods. You want to use lids that are good, that do not have any kind of discoloration. This one has a whole bunch of discoloration, as you can see. Okay, it's been sitting in the sink, so it's got mold, it's got rust on it. It's no good. The only thing I use it for is to keep the dirt out of my canning jars. Once I've sanitized them, I use it to just keep the dirt and crap out of my jars. So when I go to use my jars, I don't have a long prep time to rewash and sanitize, you know. All I got to do is stick the jars in the oven for a little bit and boom, I'm ready to can, right? Little trick, okay? You can use, if you really want to, especially with the rice. I believe Alaska Prepper has showed a video on how to use 2-liter drink bottles for putting your rice in there with an oxygen absorber and sealing it. I don't like to do that. I like to have mine in Mylar or canning jars. And the reason I say or canning jars, okay, because you want to determine where you're going to store this stuff. Now, if you have a big family, you might even be using buckets. I have just me and the puppy dog. So I'm going to store all of my meals in single serving size. If you have a family of 8, you're going to store all of your meals in 8 serving sizes. So this is going to determine what size container you want to store your stuff in. Okay? If 50 pounds of rice will last me all a year and a half. Okay? Because I'll use half a cup of rice, a quarter cup of pinto beans, and that's a freaking meal for me. All right? For some people, they need 8 cups of rice per meal. So you have to determine this. Am I going to be feeding just me, or am I going to be feeding an army? Okay, so if you're going to feed an army, you're going to get the big Mylar bags, and you're going to put probably this whole 25-pound bag here in that Mylar bag with probably, I would say, at least 10 oxygen absorbers in that Mylar bag. You're going to use your food saver or some other item where you can suck the air out of the Mylar bag, seal that Mylar bag, and put that in a 5-gallon bucket with a Gamma Seal. Now, why I say 5-gallon bucket? Okay. The reason why you want to use a 5-gallon bucket if you have something big like this is because if you have it just in Mylar and you're storing in huge quantities, you're probably not going to have that in your house. You're probably going to either have that in a cache or out in a shed or at your bug out location. And so now you have to think about weather and rats and mice and squirrels and raccoons and possums. Okay, most of you will consider the rats and the mice as be the first thing in your mind. You won't consider the possums or the raccoons, and raccoons are very smart. And if they can figure out how to open up one Mylar bag, they'll go through and they'll open up 20 of them just to see what's in it and destroy your food. They'll do the same thing in your chicken coop. If they can get in your chicken coop, they'll kill all of your chickens just to see if they can do it. I mean, the butt heads, okay? Possums are good to have around. They will eat ticks. They will eat a lot of your insects and pests that are in your yard. However, they are a rodent of the rodent family, and they will go through Mylar like it's tissue paper. And if you've ever cornered a possum, they'll go through you like you tissue paper too. Okay, they got some pretty good teeth on them. All right, so you want to put it in hard plastic, and sometimes even that is not going to deter a determined pest. And a determined pest, by that I mean if a bear gets the smell of it, yeah, that 5-gallon bucket is not going to last very long. They're going to eat it. Okay, so your basic idea is you freeze your food for a week. I've had these in the freezer for about 2 months. So, I mean, you can keep them in the freezer as long as you want. They're not going to go bad because they're in the freezer. They're in the deep freeze. They're not going to go bad. Okay, so if you want to just grab a 25-pound bag of rice and throw it in the bottom of your freezer and leave it there for when you need it, hey, great. My freezer space is prime territory. Okay, I don't like stuff to be in my freezers for long, and these have been there for 2 months and taking up my whole bottom of my freezer, and I need that room because it's getting ready to go into hunting season. Shout out to all my fellow hunters. Good luck this year. So Mylar bags, canning jars, oxygen absorbers. Easiest way to do it. I put mine in canning jars. And the reason I put mine in canning jars and some in Mylar, some of my Mylar goods go out in the shed. And so I have a Rubbermaid tote that they go into out in the shed. But most of my food goes into canning jars. And that is because it's just easier for me to grab that off of my shelf and use it and brew wash it and continue on. And some of the canning jars I use, you're going to laugh because I'm not sure anybody's actually discussed this. Now, I happen to like Ragu and Prego. And these jars are reusable. And amazingly enough, the little lid is reusable too. Now, if you lose the lid, you can use a regular canning jar lid on these. Ask me how I know. Okay, experience. You can reuse those jars. You can also reuse any glassware that you get at the store. Let's say that you buy, oh, I don't know, some jelly, and it happens to be Welch's jelly, and it's in a glass jar with a lid with a rubber seal in the top of it. You can reuse that. I mean, it's going to take you a little bit to get all the jelly out of it and wash it down and sanitize it, but you can reuse it. And you can reuse it for dry goods of all kinds, okay? Throwing it away is not something I would do, but more power to you if you just want to buy just regular canning jars, okay? I recommend that you have a little bit of both. I recommend that you do a little bit of Mylar. I recommend that you do a little bit in canning jars. And the reason I say that is, if you lose electricity in extreme weather, whether it be heat or cold, the likelihood of your canning jars losing a seal climbs exponentially. And if you have a deep freeze, it could crack your jars. And then once you have a crack in your canning jars, they're useless. You can't use them again. Now, these cannot, and I'm going to say this very clearly, these cannot be reused for water bath canning or pressure canning. They are only good for storing like sugar. I store a lot of my sugar in these, rice, or dry goods with an oxygen absorber. Now, if you put sugar in one of these, don't put an oxygen absorber. You'll get a brick, and then you'll have to break the jar, and you just threw that sugar away because you don't have glass all in your sugar, and it's no good. Okay? If you don't use regular sugar, hey, honey, you can store honey in one of those jars. Okay? Those are the two that you do not need to put oxygen absorber in. Is honey and sugar. Okay, they don't need it. Pasta, same thing. You're gonna do the same thing with your pasta that you do with your beans and your rice. You're gonna freeze it for a week, and then I get these big canisters, and I put it in the big canister with the oxygen absorber. And it keeps it good, and I rotate it. This one I just used the last of it last night, so I've got to take it down and wash it, sanitize it, and get it ready to redo for tomorrow. If you want to store your pasta in the freezer, again, you can do that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have pasta in my freezer right now that's been in there for 2 years. As long as you have a frost freeze freezer, you have no issue. The only issue you're going to have in order to use it, when you bring it out, you're going to have to let it come up to room temperature. And that could take, depending on the package, that could take a week. That could take 24 hours. That could take 72 hours. It could take 8 hours. I mean, it just depends on the size of the package. So, that's what we're doing this weekend. Always thinking ahead, always buying ahead, rotating your stock. Always do that. When you put your rice and your beans in your jar, I highly recommend that you write on the lid or on a label, same thing with the Mylar, the date. Because you want to use up your dry goods. You want to put your dry goods in rotation. And my dry goods are on a 5-year rotation. So you want to make sure that before 5 years is up that you're using the last of that rotation. Just a good rule of thumb in my book. Okay, it's not that they're not going to be have any nutritional value, but after about a year, it takes so long to boil them to edible consistency that you end up more with refried beans than you do pinto beans. Just say. So, just be aware of that. Rice, they found rice 2,500 years old, still good. So, rice will never go bad as long as it's in a sealed container away from oxygen and pest. It won't go bad. Okay? If you're worried about rice going bad, rinse it before you cook it. And when you rinse it, I know that a lot of people were talking about plastic in the rice last year, coming out of specific countries. So, yeah, when you rinse it, you want to rinse it in a pot, and the plastic or the bad rice will rise to the top, and you can kind of swirl it around a little bit and just strain those out with a mesh strainer. And that's what I'm doing today. And got a little bit bored. I'm also doing a little bit something over here. Let's go over here. Because I got a little bit bored earlier because I couldn't do anything. And I sanded this down, and I kind of drew a diagram on here. And I'm going to paint this. And I just got bored. I says, I'm tired of just looking at a plain TV tray that the varnish is coming off and everything. I decided, why don't we sand it down and paint it? I got everything to sand it down and paint it, so why not? So that's what I'm doing. So y'all have a blessed day, and bicycle.